Captain Marcus Ridge hurled the jammed M16A4 rifle at Sarah Kane. "Take it, Secretary. At least pretend you know which end shoots." Ridge's voice dripped with contempt, cutting through the explosions outside FOB Titan's perimeter walls. Sarah caught the weapon with reflexes so natural that Walker, the young private crouched beside her, had to look twice. Her fingers swept across the safety selector with a movement he swore was more professional than their drill instructors. The alarm sirens had started wailing at 1,500 hours. FOB Titan wasn't much to look at. A small forward operating base housing 72 souls in Afghanistan's Wardak province, surrounded by concrete barriers that now seemed pathetically inadequate against the 190 insurgent fighters converging on their position. Sarah had been at Titan for 8 months, quietly filing reports and keeping to herself. The other soldiers knew her as the soft-spoken sergeant first class who typed faster than anyone else and never complained about the 115-degree heat. What they didn't know was why she unconsciously checked wind direction with loose sand every morning, or why her old dog tag bore serial numbers that had been deliberately worn away. "Get your skinny ass to supply and grab more mags." Ridge barked as mortar rounds began walking closer. The captain was 6'4" and built like a linebacker. He made no secret of his opinion that women belonged in support roles, preferably stateside. "Sergeant Kane is our dead weight," he'd announced during yesterday's briefing, loud enough for everyone to hear. The first wave hit the western perimeter at 1,515 hours. Insurgent fighters poured over the ridge line like angry ants, their war cries mixing with automatic weapons fire. Sarah watched Ridge directing the defense, his movements increasingly frantic as reports crackled over the radio. Something made Sarah pause as she headed for the supply bunker. A sound beneath the chaos, the distinctive crack thump of an SVD sniper rifle. She tilted her head slightly, calculating trajectory from the sound delay. 975 meters, she murmured to herself. Northwest ridge line, probably behind that cluster of rocks. "What did you say?" Walker had followed her, clutching his M16 like a lifeline. The kid was 20, fresh out of boot, and his hands shook. "There's a sniper northwest ridge, 975 meters out. Tell Captain Ridge he needs to shift 3rd Squad 25 meters south or they'll be sitting ducks." "How could you possibly know?" "Just tell him." The young private sprinted back to Ridge, who was screaming into his radio for fire support that wasn't coming. Sarah watched the exchange, saw Ridge wave Walker away dismissively. The distinctive crack of the SVD sounded again. This time, a soldier from 3rd Squad spun and dropped, clutching his shoulder. Ridge's eyes went wide as he realized the female desk jockey had been right. "Tower 2 is down. They're inside the wire." The panicked voice over the radio made Sarah's blood run cold. She could hear automatic weapons fire getting closer, the distinctive sound of AK-47s mixing with the heavier thump of American M240 machine guns. The insurgents had breached the outer perimeter faster than anyone had anticipated. Ridge was losing control of the situation, his voice cracking as he tried to coordinate a defense that was rapidly falling apart. Sarah's mind automatically began calculating fields of fire, dead space, likely avenues of approach. Years of suppressed training surfaced like muscle memory, her tactical awareness sharpening despite her efforts to remain invisible. Walker came running back, his face pale with fear and confusion. "He says you're just a clerk and to stay out of his way." "But ma'am, how did you know about that sniper?" Sarah didn't answer. She was already moving toward the damaged M16A for that Ridge had thrown at her, her hands checking the weapon with practiced efficiency that spoke of experience far beyond administrative duties. The M16A4 felt familiar in Sarah's hands despite the obvious damage to the upper receiver. The bolt carrier group moved sluggishly, and she could see where the charging handle had been bent from impact. This weapon shouldn't fire reliably, if at all. But as explosions rocked FOB Titan's perimeter, reliable wasn't an option they had. Ridge's voice carried across the compound, increasingly desperate as reports flooded in from all sectors. We've got multiple breaches on the eastern wall. Second squad is taking heavy casualties. Where the hell is that air support? Sarah listened to the tactical picture developing with professional assessment that came from years of experience Ridge couldn't imagine. The insurgents were executing a coordinated assault with precision that suggested professional military training. This wasn't random violence. It was calculated warfare designed to overwhelm the base's defenses through simultaneous pressure on multiple fronts. Walker crouched beside her, his young face streaked with dust and fear. The kid kept glancing between Sarah and the chaos erupting around them, confusion evident in his expression. "Ma'am, the way you knew about that sniper, the way you're handling that rifle. Who are you really?" Sarah's fingers continued their methodical inspection of the damaged weapon. Muscle memory, guiding actions she'd performed thousands of times in places Walker couldn't pronounce. "I'm just admin," she replied quietly, but her voice carried undertones that suggested otherwise. The SVD cracked again from the northwest ridge, and another American soldier cried out in pain. Ridge spun around, his face flushed with anger and growing panic. "That sniper is picking us apart, and we can't get a fix on his position." His eyes fell on Sarah, and for a moment, desperation overcame his prejudice. "You clerk, you seem to know where he is. Can you do anything useful besides file paperwork?" Sarah looked up from the broken rifle, her expression calm despite the chaos surrounding them. The question she'd been dreading and anticipating had finally come. "Give me a clear line of sight and 30 seconds. Ridge stared at Sarah for a moment, his desperation warring with disbelief. 30 seconds to do what? Take out a sniper at 975 meters with a broken rifle. The captain's voice carried the tone of someone who'd already written off the possibility but was running out of options. Sarah stood slowly, the damaged M16A4 cradled with professional competence that made Walker's eyes widen. She moved toward the eastern watchtower, the only position that offered clear sight lines to the northwest ridge where the SVD had been firing from. Her movements were deliberate, economical, the gait of someone who'd done this before under circumstances that meant life or death. Ridge followed, shouting orders into his radio, while keeping one eye on the clerk who'd somehow become his last hope. All squads were attempting counter-sniper operations. "Cease fire on the northwest ridge for 30 seconds. Mark your targets and wait for my signal." The climb up the watchtower ladder felt surreal. 8 months of hiding, of pretending to be nothing more than an administrative specialist who processed reports and stayed invisible. Now she was ascending to a firing position with a weapon that shouldn't work, preparing to take a shot that would either save the base or expose everything she'd worked to bury. Walker had followed them, his M16 ready but his hands still trembling. From the elevated position, the tactical situation became horrifyingly clear. FOB Titan was being systematically dismantled by professional fighters who knew exactly how to exploit weaknesses in the defensive perimeter. Smoke rose from multiple buildings, wounded soldiers sought cover wherever they could find it, and the distinctive sound of incoming mortars suggested the assault was far from over. Sarah positioned herself at the window, the broken rifle's bipod legs deployed on the concrete ledge. Through the damaged iron sights, she could see the rocky outcropping where muzzle flash had betrayed the sniper's position. 975 meters of distance, crosswinds gusting from the southeast, elevation differential, and equipment that might jam on the first trigger pull. Sarah's breathing slowed to the rhythm she'd learned years ago in places that didn't exist on official maps. The damaged M16A4 settled into her shoulder like an old friend, despite the bent charging handle and sluggish bull carrier. Through the iron sights, she calculated windage, elevation, and the dozen variables that separated success from failure at 975 meters. The SVD cracked again from the ridge, and another American voice cried out in the compound below. Each shot from the enemy sniper was methodical, professional, designed to create maximum psychological impact while systematically eliminating key personnel. This wasn't random harassment. It was targeted elimination by someone who understood military operations. Ridge crouched beside her, his radio crackling with increasingly desperate reports from squad leaders who were watching their positions collapse under coordinated assault. "Can you actually make this shot?" His voice carried equal parts hope and skepticism. Sarah didn't answer immediately. Her mind was processing calculations that had once been second nature, muscle memory competing with years of deliberate suppression. Wind speed from dust patterns, mirage effect from heated concrete, trajectory compensation for a rifle that wasn't zeroed for this distance. The damaged weapon introduced variables she'd have to compensate for instinctively. Walker watched from the ladder, his young face reflecting awe and confusion as he witnessed the transformation taking place before him. The quiet clerk was disappearing, replaced by something harder, more focused, infinitely more dangerous. "Ma'am, your hands aren't shaking at all. How are you so calm?" "Because panic kills accuracy, and accuracy keeps people alive." Sarah's response was automatic, the kind of tactical wisdom that came from experience rather than textbooks. She settled deeper into her firing position, the rifle becoming extension of her, rather than separate tool. The enemy sniper fired again, muzzle flash barely visible against the rocky background. Sarah tracked the flash, estimated position, calculated lead time for a moving target who might relocate after his next shot. One opportunity, maybe two if the rifle didn't jam. Everything depended on precision that shouldn't be possible with damaged equipment. Sarah found the space between heartbeats where the world became perfectly still. Her finger applied pressure to the trigger with surgical precision, the damaged M16A4 responding despite the mechanical problems that should have made accuracy impossible. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, the damaged bolt cycling sluggishly but managing to extract and eject the spent cartridge. Through the iron sights, she tracked the bullet's flight path across 975 meters of Afghan air, compensating for wind drift and elevation drop that would have challenged even perfect equipment. The round took 1.3 seconds to traverse the distance between FOB Titan's watchtower and the rocky outcropping, where muzzle flash had betrayed the enemy sniper's position. When it impacted, the SVD fell silent permanently. Ridge stared through his binoculars at the distant ridge, his expression shifting from skepticism to disbelief to something approaching awe. "I don't see any movement from that position. No muzzle flash. No return fire." His voice carried the tone of someone witnessing something that shouldn't be possible. Walker climbed the rest of the way up the ladder, his young face reflecting pure amazement. "Ma'am, that was incredible. How did you make that shot with a broken rifle at that distance?" The question Sarah had been dreading hung in the air between them. 8 months of careful anonymity had just evaporated with a single trigger pull that saved lives but revealed everything she'd worked to hide. The tactical situation across FOB Titan began shifting immediately. Without the systematic harassment from the Northwest Ridge, American forces could maneuver more freely, concentrate fire on remaining threat positions, coordinate defensive actions that had been impossible under continuous sniper fire. Ridge's radio crackled with reports that reflected the sudden change in tactical balance. 2nd Squad reporting enemy withdrawal from Eastern Sector. 3rd Squad advancing to retake the motor pool. The enemy commander appears to have been eliminated. Sarah carefully safed the damaged weapon, her movements reflecting training that Walker was beginning to recognize came from somewhere far beyond administrative school. The shot had been necessary, but it opened questions that threatened the carefully constructed anonymity she'd maintained for 8 months at FOB Titan. Word of the impossible shot spread through FOB Titan faster than wildfire. Soldiers emerged from defensive positions, pointing toward the watchtower where the quiet administrative clerk had just eliminated an enemy sniper at nearly 1,000 meters with a damaged rifle. Their faces reflected mixtures of disbelief, admiration, and the dawning realization that they'd been working alongside someone extraordinary without knowing it. Ridge lowered his binoculars, his expression cycling through emotions as he processed what he'd witnessed. Sergeant Kane, that was the finest piece of marksmanship I've seen in 15 years of service. His voice carried genuine respect that replaced the contempt he'd shown just minutes earlier. How the hell did you learn to shoot like that? Sarah remained silent, her hands methodically checking the M16A4's action to ensure it would cycle properly if needed again. The question demanded answers she wasn't prepared to give, revelations that would destroy the anonymity she'd carefully maintained for 8 months. Walker scrambled up the ladder, followed by several other soldiers who'd witnessed the shot from ground level. Their faces showed the kind of, or reserved for witnessing something that challenged their understanding of what was possible. Ma'am, Rodriguez wants to know if you can teach him to shoot like that. And Peterson is asking if you're actually special forces. The questions came rapid fire, each one threatening to unravel the carefully constructed identity she'd built around administrative competence and deliberate invisibility. Sarah looked out across FOB Titan's perimeter, watching American soldiers advance into positions they couldn't have held 5 minutes earlier. The elimination of the enemy sniper had shifted tactical momentum decisively in their favor. Lives had been saved, the base secured, but at the cost of exposure she'd spent years avoiding. Ridge stepped closer, his voice dropping to a tone reserved for sensitive conversations. Sergeant Kane, I think we need to have a private discussion about your background and qualifications. Because what I just witnessed suggests you're considerably more than an administrative specialist. The helicopter's sounds grew audible in the distance, distinctive rotor signatures that made Sarah's blood run cold with recognition. The distinctive whoop of rotor blades suddenly filled the air. 2 black UH-60s materialized from the heat shimmer, flying fast and low. They flared hard over FOB Titan, door gunners already engaging targets on the ridgeline. Sarah's eyes tracked their approach, noting the lack of unit markings, the modified rotor systems. She knew these birds. More importantly, she knew who flew them. Operators in black kit fast roped down with speed that made regular infantry look like they were moving in slow motion. Navy SEALs. The cavalry had arrived, but Sarah knew this was no coincidence. One of the operators, a master sergeant with graying temples, paused when he saw Sarah, even through his ballistic sunglasses. She could see the recognition, the disbelief. Within minutes, the combined firepower had broken the insurgent assault completely. Enemy fighters streamed back over the ridge lines, leaving their dead behind. As the dust settled, a third helicopter appeared on the horizon. A command bird with communication arrays bristling from its hull. It circled once before setting down. The man who stepped out made Ridge snap to attention. Major General David Cross, commander of Joint Special Operations Command, the kind of brass that never showed up at a tiny FOB unless something monumentally significant had occurred. Cross strode through the carnage with purposeful gait. He stopped in front of Sarah, who had risen to attention despite the rifle still in her hands. Master Sergeant Kane, Cross said quietly, using a rank that made Ridge's head snap around. Or should I still call you Ghost? Sarah's facade finally cracked. For years of hiding, of pretending to be nobody, of filing papers, and keeping her head down, all of it crumbled in the face of that call sign. Sir, I'm just admin now. Your contract was voided the moment you picked up that rifle, Cross interrupted. He pulled out a tablet, swiping through classified files. Operation Silent Thunder, Fallujah. For years ago, you and your spotter held off 150 insurgents for 18 hours while Delta Force extracted a captured pilot. Ridge had gone pale, his legs visibly shaking. The story was legend in special operations circles. The official report listed you as Kia. Cross continued, imagine my surprise when Fort Benning's AI flagged a routine marksmanship qualification that matched your shooting signature exactly. Then today, someone at FOB Titan just made an impossible shot that saved the entire garrison. Permission to speak freely, sir? Cross nodded. I requested the discharge. I requested the new identity. After Silent Thunder, after losing Henderson, I couldn't. I needed to not be Ghost anymore. Sarah's hands stilled on the rifle. The words came out quietly, carrying years of suppressed pain. Cross's expression was grim. The enemy commander you just neutralized. Signal intelligence indicates he was trained by the same network that set up the Silent Thunder ambush. The revelation hit like a physical blow. You're telling me the shot I just made that wasn't random? Cross shook his head. Nothing about today was random. Someone wanted to draw you out to confirm you were still alive. And now they know, Sarah said flatly, which is why I need you back on active status. You're the only operator who's faced this network and survived. Walker stood frozen, his young face cycling through confusion and awe as he processed the conversation unfolding before him. The quiet clerk he'd known for months was actually a legendary special operations sniper presumed dead for 4 years. Ridge remained at attention, but his expression showed the profound shock of someone realizing he'd been dismissing one of the military's most lethal operators as administrative deadweight. Around them, the other soldiers of FOB Titan maintained respectful distance, but their faces reflected the same mixture of amazement and disbelief. They'd witnessed something extraordinary, a legend revealing herself in the most dramatic way possible. Sarah Kane, administrative specialist, was dead. In her place stood Master Sergeant Sarah Ghost Kane, one of the most lethal snipers in American military history. Cross checked his watch. The bird leaves in 20 minutes. Pack what you need, Ghost. It's time to come home. The transformation was complete, irreversible, and terrifying in its implications for enemies who thought her dead. The silence stretched across FOB Titan as the weight of revelation settled over everyone present. Walker found his voice first, his words carrying the awe of someone processing the impossible. Ma'am, Ghost, you've been here 8 months filing reports and serving chow. How did nobody know? Sarah looked at the young private with something approaching affection. The best way to disappear is to become exactly what people expect to ignore. Administrative clerks are invisible, forgettable. That was the point. Ridge stepped forward, his earlier contempt replaced by professional respect tinged with embarrassment. Master Sergeant, I owe you an apology. The way I treated you, the things I said. If I'd known. Sarah cut him off with a gesture. Captain, you treated me exactly the way I wanted to be treated. Anonymous, dismissed, forgotten. It kept me safe for 4 years. Cross gestured toward the command helicopter, its rotors already beginning to spin up. The enemy network we're tracking has been systematically eliminating operators who've had contact with their organization. You were safer dead than alive, but today changed that equation permanently. As they walked toward the landing zone, soldiers from FOB Titan lined the path. Some saluted, others simply stared, all of them understanding they'd witnessed something extraordinary. The quiet woman who'd processed their leave requests and supply requisitions was actually a legend they'd heard whispered about in special operations circles. Sarah paused at her quarters, grabbing a small duffel bag that had been packed and ready for 4 years. Inside were the few possessions that mattered: photographs of Henderson, her original dog tags, and a small notebook containing tactical observations she'd never stopped making despite her administrative cover. Walker followed her to the helicopter, his expression still reflecting disbelief. What happens now, Ghost? Sarah looked back at FOB Titan one last time, at the place that had been her sanctuary and prison for 8 months. Now I finish what Henderson and I started in Fallujah. Some debts can only be paid in full. The helicopter lifted off, carrying her toward a confrontation 4 years in the making. As Sarah boarded the black helicopter, she turned for one last look at FOB Titan. Soldiers lined the landing pad, some saluting, others simply staring. They'd witnessed something extraordinary, but they would never fully understand the cost of what they'd seen. The rotor wash kicked up dust and debris as the aircraft lifted off, carrying her away from 8 months of carefully constructed anonymity. Cross handed her a classified folder marked with security classifications that made Walker's security clearance look like a library card. The enemy commander you neutralized today was more than just a sniper. He was a key coordinator for the same network that orchestrated the Silent Thunder ambush. They've been hunting operators who survived encounters with their organization. Sarah opened the folder, her face hardening as she recognized tactical signatures, operational patterns, and photographic evidence that connected today's attack directly to the nightmare that had claimed Henderson 4 years earlier. You're telling me they knew I was alive? They've suspected for months. Today's attack was designed to force you into action, confirm your identity, and draw you back into the open. Cross's voice carried the weight of someone delivering news that would reshape everything. Now they know Ghost is alive, and they'll come for you with everything they have. The helicopter banked toward the setting sun, its destination classified, but its purpose clear. Sarah was returning to a world she'd tried to leave behind, drawn back by enemies who'd never stopped hunting her and by debts that demanded payment regardless of personal cost. She thought about Henderson, about the 18 hours they'd held impossible odds in Fallujah, about the promise she'd made to finish what they'd started. Some things couldn't be buried beneath administrative duties and deliberate anonymity. Walker's voice echoed in her memory, asking what happens now. The answer was simple and terrifying in its implications. Now she would do what Ghost did best, hunt the hunters who thought her dead, eliminate the network that had taken Henderson, and prove that some legends were too dangerous to kill. The helicopter carried her toward a reckoning 4 years in the making. But as the rotor spun up, Sarah wasn't thinking about legends. She was thinking about Henderson, about silent thunder, about debts unpaid and justice deferred. She'd hidden for 4 years, tried to bury Ghost beneath paperwork and anonymity. But some things refused to stay buried. The helicopter gained altitude, carrying her away from the life she'd built at FOB Titan toward a future that demanded everything she'd tried to forget. Through the window, she watched the Afghan landscape pass below, endless brown terrain that had witnessed too much violence, too many secrets, too many lives lost to conflicts that seemed to have no resolution. Cross sat across from her, reviewing intelligence reports that painted a picture of an enemy network more extensive and dangerous than anyone had imagined. They've been operating for 6 years, coordinating attacks across multiple theaters, targeting specific operators who've disrupted their operations. You and Henderson weren't random targets in Fallujah. You were specifically hunted. Sarah's hands tightened on the folder, her knuckles white with suppressed emotion. Henderson had been more than a spotter, more than a partner. He'd been the best friend she'd ever had, someone who understood the weight of taking lives to save lives, someone who'd never questioned her decisions when split-second choices meant survival or death. His loss had shattered something inside her that 4 years hadn't managed to repair. The helicopter's destination remained classified, but Sarah understood its purpose. She was returning to a war that had never really ended, accepting responsibilities she'd tried to abandon, embracing an identity that demanded everything while offering little in return. 975 meters, a damaged rifle, one chance. In the end, that's what it always came down to. One shot, one opportunity to make a difference. She'd taken that shot today, saved lives, revealed herself to enemies who thought her dead. Now, those enemies knew the truth. Ghost was alive, armed, and coming for them. The hunt was about to begin.